Chris Sams, Government Product Solutions Leader at Nearmap. We cross paths at Priscilla Cole's Geospatial Risk Summit, New York
Yep.
City, end of January. Um, it's another great outcome, I think, of this summit that you are a guest amongst others that I've managed to coax on the show. So yeah, thanks for taking the time with us. And yeah, I think a good place to start is how you would describe geospatial, or what are some of the encounters you've had with civilians, educating them about what we do.
No, that it's yeah, when even the word geospatial, that could be misinterpreted in an insurance company. I think there was even a story told at the conference about that. But it's inevitable when you either your wife or your friends and they're introducing you to someone new. They're like, "Oh yeah, and it's just small talk. Like, what do you do for work?" And you're like, "Well, how deep do you go into this?" You're just like, "I work with technology," or you don't want to, I'm a tech bro or anything like that, but
Business
sometimes you just got to
analysis.
gauge. Yes, you have to gauge the audience as well of like, all right, how deep do I go in this? And I remember at a house party in San Francisco when I just started at RMS, which is Risk Management Solutions, and they've been recently acquired by Moody's. And these girls were talking to us, and my colleague is very smart dude. He was a structural engineer and was doing a lot of vulnerability modeling for the catastrophe models. And well, what do you guys do? And he just goes, we're risk modelers. And they just blankly looked at us. And I see them staring down at my watch. And I'm like, oh, I see. She's thinking that we're actually wrist modelers, and demonstrating bracelets or watches. And I saw her look down there, and I got it. I realized it. I was like, no, 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 no. Think risk
Something
assessment on
entirely
natural
different.
disasters or a Google Maps, and just tried to like steer it back over to a geography sense. And so just you always just have to know your audience, really. That's what
I'm
it
going to
comes
go
down
with
to.
wrist modeling though now. I think all guests, they're going to have to show us their wrist. So this is going to be a thing now. All right, perfect. So on to the risk, or with a K, agenda items. Given that this is a podcast with a focus on investing in our industry, um, I hope several of us are aware of what an incredible performer Nearmap was when it was in public markets. It was, for about 10 years, basically compounding at 20% per annum, which is basically straight up and to the right. So inevitably, private equity came a knocking, and it was Tomo Bravo that got you guys. So how has that acquisition been for Tomo Bravo?
No, I think it's been phenomenal. I think the piece has continued to, or that investment has continued to go up and to the right, like you were just saying. I think that we are a very big performer for them in their portfolio, and they had excellent timing, when they scooped up Nearmap in the market. So I don't have a bunch of the details that I can go through or share, but I know that they're very pleased with the return on investment with Nearmap, and it's allowed us though to have more capital as well. If there are some pieces that we need to bring in more people, or we need to acquire something. And Better View, which was a client and partner of Nearmaps, that acquisition happened at the end of 2023, and that has been another very, very good piece for Nearmap and expanding on the insurance perspective. And I think it was a phenomenal when. I mean, I need to quit saying phenomenal, but
All
very
right.
good blend
If there's
of
one company
skills.
that word applies to, it's Nearmap in my view. I'm fine
Yeah,
with
now
it.
the way that they were able to obtain a lot of the U.S. market, after they moved over from Australia, um, very, very impressive.
Okay, so I think maybe we better get the basics out of the way. So you're in the remote sensing space, but as I understand it, it's aerial imagery. Is that correct?
That is correct. So
Okay.
Nearmap has a fleet of planes with that we lease, and then we have all of our proprietary camera systems attached to those permanently. And we operate in US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And then we have a standard capture program where we're trying to hit places as often as we can, because I think frequency is a very key piece, and a lot of our clients think that is a key differentiator for us. And then, added bonus, cherry on top with the resolution, but then offering, you've got the vertical straight down, you've got the oblique from the side, 3D, and then a piece that I oversee from the product perspective is our impact response. So post catastrophe. And it's critical for insurance, it's critical for government, it's critical for even architectural engineering firms, AEC. And when you've got that before and after picture, um, it says a lot. And when we're able to get the planes in the air after it's been cleared by FFA, the towers at the airports, or any kind of weather patterns as well. Because honestly, when it's cloudy, it's not going to be very good imagery if
Sure.
the plane's flying above that.
Right.
So
But you guys at least have a
unless it's
chance because
SAR.
there's some, yeah, sure. So there's some clouds at least that you could fly below. So that's a way to get ahead of satellite imagery providers. Okay, so I'm guessing you guys have got IP then, or you've copyrighted your own camera designs.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's a competitive
and yeah, I was
advantage
just
then.
talking with some of those guys too. It just like blows my mind, and I don't know much about the camera systems. I did study remote sensing, so I've got my RGB down, and then whatever if we need to expand on multispectral or hyperspectral. But I was just looking at the systems, and they're so complicated, and the maintenance, and all of the work that goes into it, and they are smashing as much of that camera inside of that bubble to fit inside of the plane. And it's amazing how much they've been able to maximize the camera power inside there with
Yeah.
that small space.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fascinating, and I think there's a lot of potential there for gaining the interest of any podcast audience, really, actually making a visit to a factory or at least an installation on a plane. I think a lot of people would love to see what one of these things looks like. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, just flagging that as maybe for a future episode. Okay, so it's good to characterize what you guys do, some of your competitive advantages, how a private equity firm perceived the value that you offer and snapped you up. You
Yeah.
then flagged your own, or the fact that that gave you access to extra capital. You then were able to do your own acquisition. So BetterView was also a aerial imagery uh, company, was it? Or
No, no, they were strictly with the analytics piece. And
okay,
so they were purchasing imagery from us, and then they be able to provide that to insurers, especially like from a claim perspective,
okay,
identifying issues with the roof or anything with the property before or after a major storm. And they'd be able to zoom in on a particular property or parcel level. Um, Geocode and examine it that way. Or even like predictive type analyses as well. Like, okay, the storm's coming. It's a category 4. Um, this is what could happen, based on the vulnerability pieces of these structures and the hazard that's coming. Or afterwards, kind of doing an artificial intelligence piece of like, show me all of the structures that were damaged in this process. Okay, now classify each one of those for me. No damage, minor damage, severe damage, complete loss, and just speeding up that process for insurance companies, and that's what Better View was focusing on.
Yep, amazing. So I think a lot of us will be reminded of the flurry on LinkedIn, for example, of those kinds of analyses after the fires over in California. Especially, I think Microsoft's AI for Good, for example, team
Yep.
was spitting out analyses every couple of days of that sort. So yeah, interesting to see, gain more insight. Um, about that kind of those kinds of analytics. So it sounds like then you're going for vertical integration, really. You've got the capture side, and then downstream of that, you've got an analytics service.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yep. Cool. All right. So yeah, interesting to observe these trends. All right. So could you tell us about continuing on this analytics track in our conversation? Could you tell us about the impact response product suite?
I thought you would never ask, so like stepping into my wheelhouse for sure. And we've got a dedicated team that are monitoring these storms, looking at various different sources. And NOAA and the National Weather Service. I'll touch on that a little bit later, but it's definitely a sore spot in my heart, and it's a big loss for the industry and for the country as well. But I'll set that aside and we can unpackage that a little bit later. And but this dedicated team though is staying on top of storms. Where do the planes need to be positioned, in major hurricane events, monitoring for fires, monitoring severe weather in terms of hail or tornadoes. And they're very bright individuals. They're very smart when it comes to this piece. We've got meteorologists, we've got people that are making sure that the planes are where they need to be, establishing the flight patterns, moving them if there's clouds to capture another spot. There's a whole bunch of other compliments they usually want me to tell about them, and I'm forgetting some of those, but I think you get the idea. It is an impressive team, and they make my product look really, really good. And so say there's a hurricane approaching, and it's going to hit Florida, and that is where I am based as well. And if it's going to be hitting the peninsula part, say like Tampa, like Milton did, then we've got
Yeah.
them either Miami, where they might be safe for the planes, or maybe even in the Panhandle or the Redneck Riviera, where I live. Um, and capturing it, flying back, getting the data uploaded, and then processing. And that is one thing that is absolutely critical for our clients is the turnaround time. The faster, the better. And it's it's extremely valuable to insurers, for various reasons, for governments as well. It helps with the emergency response. It helps with federal funding, but we'll see what happens with that now.
Mm,
When applying for it, like half of the city is damaged, and at the same time, it's we're there to generate some revenue for Tower Bravo and for ourselves. But at the same time, there is a huge impact on the human life aspect. And so that's one thing that also makes me feel good, that I feel like we've got a very, very good product. And then at the same time, we're helping people too. We speed up the claims process from an insurance perspective because they know, hey, these are the damaged houses. These are the ones that have been completely wiped out. Let's focus on these first. And it just speeds up that whole workflow and prioritizes it.
yeah.
But from the
Could
local
we
government too.
Yeah, I just wanted to dig in on the Milton response, I guess. So it's interesting running this podcast because a part of it has become that there's a big disaster, and then I just look at the companies in our industry and how they're responding, and then we talk to them. And that sort of actually began around the time of Hurricanes Helene and Milton, because that's when I was around the time I had Fathom on, which is it was separate. It's another acquisition story actually in industry. They were their own private flood modeling company in Bristol. A real great story of success from the startup ecosystem, I guess, around Bristol University.
Yep.
and then Swiss Re bought them, and there was we got a bit of extra insight of the sorts of modeling and what goes on behind the scenes in our industry's response to this kind of a disaster. But now you're the next one to throw the hat in the ring, I guess. So have you got any examples of really what the step-by-step response was, or what customers came to you and bought off the shelf from you to facilitate a response to Hurricane Milton, for example?
Yeah, so I think we
What
can
did they
lump
say on the
both.
phone when they called you up the next day, sort of thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, one, it's if you don't have it, it's a sense of panic where you're like, how do I deal with this? Okay, and if you're from, especially from a government side, the procurement, you've got to go through like an RFP process and like have to have so many bids, and that's a complete
Wow. Okay.
nightmare. So the better option is to have that subscription already in
Yep.
hand, and then boom, you're getting it 24 hours. I like to tout our response times, and I've got a lot of statistics, based on that. But that's what we aim for when the plane touches down, 24 hours, and you can have this imagery. But you can almost, and I tell some of my clients too, that it's almost like an insurance policy or that home warranty where you know you don't need it part of the time, but then when your washing machine goes out, you're like, oh, and then it's $700 to replace it. And you're like, I could buy one brand new for almost the same price. It's that peace of mind as well. They know they're going to be getting that stuff.
Okay, so through that subscription, they're getting all of your historical imagery. They're getting a web platform, I'm guessing, similar to Google Maps, and they can see, what the latest flight has been, basically. And you mentioned also 3D before, so where you've got 3D city coverage, they're getting the 3D buildings as well in that web platform, I'm guessing.
That is correct. We wouldn't
And,
do the 3D though with like the damaged
okay,
buildings. It's kind of that trade-off because I've asked clients, hey, would you love oblique and 3D, after a hurricane? They're like, yes, give that to us. I was like, okay, well, that's going to slow down the
right,
response time, so maybe there's some levers we could pull,
okay.
but
So
the
instead of 24
speed
hours, yeah,
the speed is the number one thing. And
for sure.
so, and sometimes 24 hours isn't possible because it's still cloudy or
Yeah.
other weather patterns, or we haven't been cleared by air traffic control,
Yeah,
so
I mean,
other variables that we're trying to deal with here.
I've got a slightly strange sounding, like, because you've heard of ambulance chasing lawyers. I don't at all want to, I don't want to tie you with the same brush, but it sounds like you've always got a fleet of planes that, as you keep saying, as soon as the FAA approves you getting in the air, as soon as the last, currents and eddies from the hurricane have come out, because I guess they're pretty light planes, you are, yeah, flying over the trail of destruction. It's quite a fascinating image, really.
Yeah. Well, and then, but I will say that the combination, though, sometimes it wasn't a strategic plan of like where where we were placing the planes. They were already doing our standard capture
Okay.
over the rest of like, hey, we're hitting New York City 3 or 4 times, or we've hitting the spot in Oklahoma twice, and the plane's already there. And like, oh, okay. Now there's a severe weather system coming into play where there's thunderstorm warnings and tornado warnings, and like, perfect. We've got the plane already there capturing Dallas. Let's go north and hit these spots in Oklahoma or Kansas.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing to get some insights from the operations side of things. It's actually reminding me of the
Oh,
episode with Jordan Regene, because he stepped through Microsoft's massive countrywide data capture process, which was in partnership with Vexel Data Program and Compass
okay.
Data. And he talked also about having the operations side of things, where to put the planes and contingency measures and plans, was huge. So, yeah, I guess people don't really, they just think about the nice high resolution image from Nearmap. They don't think about all of the how the chaos to actually navigate to get
You were
those
exactly
hits.
right. And when I was first handed the keys to this product, I did not know what hurricane season was like, especially this past year. Like this one, they predicted it was going to be a quite a few named storms, but when you're in the thick of that, I just saw like what these guys were going through. Like, okay, we've got these planes over here. Oh, there's part of North Carolina that we need to look for, and just identifying all of these areas that could be impacted. And so we try to cover the urban areas. No offense, but the rural areas, that one's just a lower priority on a much different level. But
Is it that where there's a
the
structure, especially an expensive structure or a collection of structures that becomes expensive if they're obliterated, that's what drives revenue?
Yeah, well, that in population,
Sure.
that's
They
that's
tend to produce
that's where
structures.
structures are. It's
Yeah.
yeah. If we're just covering farms, we Tom and Bravo may kick us to the side,
Sure. Yeah.
but that yeah, that's that. Just how chaotic and um, seeing like how if well-defined processes in place makes it go much smoother than just having to go back and forth and respond to things or clients like, hey, are you covering this, and then just having like one source of truth
Yep.
where like, okay, this is being captured, this is pending, oh, this one's being processed, oh, now the AI layers are coming online, it's showing me classifications of all the damage to these structures as well, and that has been something that clients have not been able to live without
Hmm.
either. It's almost like finding the needle in the haystack, basically. And if it's not exact, then it's moving that most of that haystack out of the way. Like, I don't need to look here. I can focus all of my
Yeah.
efforts right here, whether you're government, whether you're insurance, whether you're a construction firm.
Okay. If not removing the entire haystack, at least isolating a few hay bales.
Exactly. I was
Yep.
trying to be modest and
It's all good.
and not go overboard, but
Yeah.
um,
In the
sometimes though
initial,
you just like what I was saying at the geospatial risk summits, trust but verify.
yeah, definitely. I guess on the carrying on that topic, one type of one sensing approach we can offer as an industry is going on beyond the cameras and using LiDAR. So do you do that as well?
We do not, but I have
Okay.
looked into that to see if this could be another component added to our camera system. Unfortunately, right now they're like, Chris, where are you going to put this? It's already jam packed, and so
Good to know. I mean, I guess I was just wondering if that because you said that it slows the turnaround time if you satisfy some of your customers' idea or request for 3D modeling, basically. Um, I'm wondering if LiDAR would speed up the turnaround time for a 3D product response. But yeah, maybe that's
well,
a
the
rabbit
the
hole we don't want to go
3D
down.
the yeah, yeah, well, the 3D hasn't been requested nearly as much as oblique angles,
I
which
see.
is also a component of building the 3D model as well, getting those side views. And so it's just a different flight pattern to be able to capture, all of the angles. And if you want the standard cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west, or if you can live with northeast, southeast, um, the other different angles.
Right. Yep. Okay. All right. So that is, I guess, the impact response product suite, unless there's any other remarks you wanted to make.
No, I think that we touched on it, and I love that though the process though is seamless. We have all the historical imagery. We've got our own cameras, their own planes. We do all of the processing. We run the AI on all of that as well to do the feature extraction. So it's very cohesive, it's consistent. You're not moving in and out to like other third party vendors or thing. You've just got a constant stream of everybody that knows from A to Z, that process. And so I feel like that is something to speak highly of as
Got
well.
you. So you've got essentially a vertically integrated solution to characterize impact so that those who buy your product can organize themselves around a response. If I can,
Exactly.
yeah, riff on the name. Okay, cool. So then there is the aerial insights for disaster response talking point that you wanted us to cover off. So Take it away.
No, I think I've already started like touching on it, giving you little sprinkles, but being able to do that classification just speeds up the process tremendously. And
All right. So just digging in a little bit more on the analytics downstream of your aerial image capture. You've called it aerial insights for disaster response. What kind of features can you pull out? We've already talked about building footprints. Can you do trees? Can you do cars? Can you do swimming pools? Uh, what else can you pull out?
yeah, we certainly touched a lot on the building footprints. And so from the standard capture program, we do that as well. And then from the aspect of catastrophe response, showing all of the damaged ones. But taking it a step further, yeah, we can identify, are there solar panels? Are they pools? And is it an underground pool or is it above ground pool? Are there sheds in the backyard? And so that's an additional building footprint. And now one thing that we're working on too is change detection. So 2022, I'm looking at the property, no shed. 2025, oh yeah, or 2023, if you're doing a year to year, showing you and highlighting, hey, there's a new shed here. And maybe if that's for property tax assessment,
Yep, I was going to say that
you
helps
have to have
the
a permit
municipality.
to put that in. And so that is a use case that we're looking at, where appraisers or tax assessors are looking at each property from year to year. What changed? Oh, okay, I'll validate that with my permits database. And oh, yeah, no, they didn't do a pool, or I see this major extension on the house, or solar panels, or now we're identifying some construction and no permits have been pulled.
Mm.
An interesting use case. The painting, the stripes like on streets, so pedestrian crosswalks or like the arrows to turn, we can identify it. And then one thing though that is useful, I'm letting in a little bit of the secret sauce here, but like the confidence. So we have confidence scores with each one of those. And as it drops down, and you're still looking at it like, yeah, that is a crosswalk, but it's hard to see, that, oh, it's time to repaint this. So
Amazing.
once it reaches a confidence threshold, this is triggers your department to go out there. Hey, we need to repaint this line.
Oh,
We need to repaint the railroad crossing piece where people have been
that,
running over
but
it.
this is really big because at the beginning of my career, my first ever job in GIS was a summer job at the City of Salisbury Council, which is like a satellite city of Adelaide in South Australia.
Okay.
And this was the height of summer. And it gets up to, for a month, it's basically 35, 40, 40 plus, degrees Celsius. So well north of 100 in your
Yep.
units. And so it was a team of three of us, and we had to ride on little scooters with DGPS antennas every single footpath in the whole council area to get cracks. So could you go as far as detecting cracks in the footpaths and looking at, if there's a big enough, like one side of the crack is higher than the other, to also inform maintenance crews or maintenance programs?
Yes. And so that was
Wow.
the next use case I was going into.
There you
And
go.
it's not really identifying like how big the crack is or how long it is. We can like per segment, how many cracks like are being identified there. And so giving you the probability of like, there's well, based on like the surface area, giving you a number of cracks
Amazing.
based on that. And so, hey, I need to prioritize this piece, but then you overlay it with, census tracts as well. You're like, oh yeah, this is one that's very heavily populated
Yep.
and we need to be focusing on this one. So helping with your prioritization. Yeah. And so you don't have kids running around on scooters or just guys wasting money driving around in
I
trucks
have
trying to
that with
find
my
cracks.
4-year-old now. Yeah. But so
Yeah.
now I'm wondering like how much it costs to employ us three, along with the scooters, the DGBS gear. We literally had to stop with a metal ruler to get the how many millimeters of deviation either side of the crack there was in the footpath, and that took sometimes 30 seconds. Okay, this is okay. All right. So those who run government municipalities, their ears have pricked up, I hope. All right. So I realize we're coming towards the end of the session, and I have to take the opportunity, Chris, to get some commentary from inside the industry about the impacts of the Doge cuts. So
Oh,
can you speak to what it means in terms of what's happened at NOAA, for example? Maybe we can start there.
it's a tremendous loss. I mean, one, it's it's a very valuable resource to this geospatial community. One, two, and selfishly, and then two, informing the public as well. Like this is a lot of our storm predictions or like where it's going to be hitting, and those modelers have got so very good at identifying where these storms are going to be hitting, and then
Mm.
you'll see that uncertainty cone go on to onto land, and the data that comes from them is key for all of this, and it's
Is it
just
going to
really
put
sad.
your right? Is it going to put your pilots at risk?
It just means more work for us. Like,
Okay.
we're going to need to find other companies that offer some of this, or we're going to need to bring in this intelligence. Some of the guys are very smart and can do it, but then they're extended. Like would needed them focusing on this aspect of the product rather than, doing all of the stuff that possibly we were getting from NOAA or the National Weather Service.
So when you say it's more work for you, do you mean it's because there's going to be more uncertainty in the possible tracks for a hurricane? And so to get ahead of that, your clients are wanting you to survey a larger area.
It's possible. We use all of that data to determine and pre-calculate, like these are the flight paths. This is where we think that most of the damage is going to be concentrated. We try to validate that though with um, you know traffic cameras, social media from a certain extent. Certainly not trying to go to Donald Trump's Truth Social account to verify anything,
Hey,
but
it's all data.
yeah, yeah, but if it's bad data, it's going to send us down the wrong route, and we're over in some farmland. Like, nope, should have never trusted that account. Um,
I
but
confess,
I,
Chris, I have to make a confession to you. I am taking a bit of a provocative approach here in what I'm about to ask you. So, the US defense industry is an industry. Most of the weapons, most of the software, is not developed, produced by government workers. For the military, as
agreed.
I understand it, it's all government defense contractors. Is there going to
Yeah.
be a phenomenon as a result of these cuts that suddenly there's going to be uh, uh, for example, Earth 2 from NVIDIA and all of the other Earth Foundation models, are they suddenly going to get a lot more business because the work of Noah has ended, but it still needs to be done and someone has to pay for it?
I don't
I'm
I
not
don't have the
endorsing
crystal
it,
ball. No, no, I know. No,
but
I feel exactly where you're coming from, and it- given the nature of firing a bunch. Oh, we made a mistake. Let's try to bring them back.
there's
Or
that too.
even with the tariffs too, it's like 25%. I'll pause it for a little bit. Or it, even, the administration can't even make up their own mind. But I think if it continues, I would agree with what you just said, that there's a possibility that now this all becomes outsourced to,
Yeah.
you know, the private companies, and it's no longer done with the government.
All right. Well, we're a minute until you've got your next meeting, so Uh, Chris, I'm gonna unfortunately have to wrap it up there. All I can
That's
say is that this conversation basically flag posted a whole bunch of extra conversations I'm sure listeners would love us to have. Especially, I think, seeing one of these cameras. So, if you could have a chat with your colleagues,
well, I
um,
asked if I could get up in the plane and see this, and they're like, "No way, our insurance will not let that happen." So,
all right. Well, maybe at a distance, if some sort of field trip could be an outcome of this, that'd be totally awesome. But yeah, thanks so much, Chris.
agreed. No, I appreciate it. Thanks, Will.